Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
Yes, Miss Presgrave. Ricky nodded. If anyone dares to betray me again, their fate will be the same as Morgan's. I called you here to assist me, and I won't treat you unfairly, but I won't tolerate any traitors or disloyal individuals. Willow's sharp gaze swept over all the team members. The team members usually found Willow easy to get along with, but now, they knew she was not to be trifled with after seeing her expression. Soon, Morgan was escorted onto a speedboat, with his hands and feet bound, and sent to a nearby country. Although they had caught Morgan, Willow's mood was still affected. She found it difficult to calm her emotions and walked alone toward a nearby path. A figure silently followed her, and he did not take his eyes off her. Willow stood in a spot as she looked at the distant scenery. She knew Jasper was following her, so she sighed and turned to look at him. "I'm really worried." Jasper couldn't comfort her for now, as no one could guarantee the artifact's final destination until they found them. He reassured her, "You know I'll do everything in my power to help you wherever you need it, right?" She nodded and felt much more at ease with him by her side. "Thank you for helping me unconditionally. Without you, we wouldn't have been so successful." Willow expressed her gratitude. Jasper's gaze softened as he looked at her and said, "You don't have to thank me. I'm willing to help you." Suddenly, she thought of something and asked with a smile, "How can I repay you when I go back?" His gaze locked onto her for a few seconds before he shook his head. "I don't need your repayment." Willow became anxious. "No. I must repay you." Whatever he asked for, she would repay him. Jasper's heart was filled with complexity and bitterness when he was faced with the sincerity in Willow's eyes. She was like a pure untouchable lily, and his identity was tainted with too much blood. He was not worthy of standing by her side. His participation in this mission was merely wishful thinking since he was not seeking any rewards or repayment. "Let's talk about this after we complete this mission. Now is not the time to discuss this," he commented as he turned around to leave. Willow became even more anxious behind him. "Why can't we talk about it now?" As she spoke, she walked quickly toward him, but in her hurry and the uneven rocky terrain, she tripped. "Ah!" she exclaimed, and her two fair and tender knees hit the ground, causing them to bleed. Jasper turned around and rushed to her side before lifting her into his arms. He looked at her two scraped knees, and his heart clenched with pain. Then, he scooped her into his arms. Willow clung to his neck and looked at him with a pitiful expression. "You left before I finished speaking." At that point, Jasper blamed himself. He shouldn't have left like that. "Be more careful next time," he advised in a low and gentle voice. Willow gazed at him, and deep down, she made a decision. Regardless of whether he wanted her to repay him or not, she would do it. It was her unilateral declaration. Upon reaching the medical room, Johanna applied disinfectant to Willow's wounds and bandaged them. At the moment, Winston was studying the artifacts unearthed from the archaeological excavation. In addition to the ancient map, they had also found some useful information, a few notes hidden on a piece of bamboo slips. This was valuable information not available to Jet. Winston was being especially careful this time and didn't share this matter in the group chat. Instead, he came to discuss it with Willow. "Willow, see if you can find any clues. The notes say they lost their ship on this island, so they all stayed until the last generation. If they lost their ship, the artifacts must still be on this island then. It would be passed down from generation to generation and guarded. This island covers an area of 18,000 square kilometers, and we can't do a carpet search as it would be highly resource intensive. It seems that the clues are still among these artifacts." Willow sighed. Jet has now brought in many experts from the archaeological field. If they find the artifacts before us, they will definitely act first. Winston, we'll have to work hard and find the evidence as soon as possible. I'm worried that the people here might still leak secrets. I'm afraid now, Winston said. At that, Jasper spoke up. Don't worry. I have control over the network here, and they can't transmit information to the outside. Winston's eyes filled with admiration after he heard this. That's great. Mr. Wyatt, you're really amazing. Send me all the evidence you've collected. If I have the time, I'll study it together with you, Jasper said. Okay. I'll send it to you right now. On second thought, I'll bring the originals over to you, Winston commented before leaving. Tonight, Willow stayed in the room on the boat. Her legs were injured, and her bodyguards were nervously guarding the boat to make sure she rested and recovered. Willow was lying on the bed and carefully looking at the originals that were sent over. They were all clear images of the artifacts and they were spread out on her bed. She looked like a studious student as she examined each one carefully. Jasper saw her lying on the bed even before pushing the door open. To save time, she tied her long hair into 2 braids in front of her chest, giving her a cute and youthful appearance. Jasper, come over and study this with me, Willow called him over. He bent down and saw her arranging the numbered documents. However, he found it difficult to focus on those boring images. Under the lamplight, her attractive face, fair and delicate skin, balanced features, and spirited eyes made it impossible to look away. As he looked on, he closed his eyes as if he needed to make a great effort to divert his thoughts from her. Willow rubbed her eyes and yawned. She was actually very tired but still focused on studying. The artifacts. She looked at a simple painting, which was also a copy taken from a mural. It was a painting drawn in despair on the mural. Would you like to rest for a while? Jasper tenderly asked. I can't sleep. Whenever I think of Jet being here, I feel like there's a whip lashing at my back, forcing me to work hard. Willow described her current feelings. He looked at her with distress. At that moment, a gust of wind blew in from outside, causing all the A4 papers in the room to fly around. She reached out to save one but then noticed another one flying in the air. She reached out to grab it but missed. She had forgotten about her injured knees in the process. Ouch, she exclaimed in pain, but her body was already leaning forward. Jasper acted swiftly. He scooped her up into his arms just in time, and gently rolled her onto the soft bed while pinning her down. Willow was frightened and closed her eyes instinctively. Before she could open her eyes, she felt the man's heavy breath next to her ear. Despite it being a rescue action, it felt like it had taken a toll on the man's life. The critical factor was not the rescue action, but the current situation of their bodies being in close contact. Willow opened her eyes, and the man's handsome face was only an inch away from her. His breath blew onto her face. It was ambiguous and filled with male hormones. His warm woody scent made her breathing quicken involuntarily. In such a situation, her first instinct would be to resist forcefully if it were any other man. However, since this man was Jasper, it was a different story. Her pretty face blushed and her somewhat restless hands instinctively wrapped around the man's neck. With a pair of doe-like eyes, she looked at him with eyes like a timid deer. The man pressing on her became heavier. He was breathing more heavily like a wild beast panting. Despite this, Willow decided to play with fire at this moment. She lifted her head and kissed Jasper's thin lips. His gaze became even more profound, and he reached for the woman's hand around his neck. His voice was hoarse as he said, "Let go." She had no choice but to comply and let go, but the next moment, her wrists were pressed against her head by the man. The ambiguous atmosphere escalated. Willow couldn't help but tremble. She felt as if she was being held tightly by a wild beast and was unsure of how to react. Finally, his lips met hers, but it was a gentle and tender kiss that intoxicated her. One kiss seemed to last for several minutes. Willow's face turned as red as if she were on fire. Jasper also realized that he had overstepped and immediately sat up while offering a hasty apology. "I'm sorry." After speaking, he pushed the door open and left. Willow sat on the bed. Her face was flushed, her mind was in chaos, and her lips were slightly swollen, but her heart filled with sweetness. Her lips, still puckered, couldn't stop a sweet smile from forming. She touched her red lips with her hand. That kiss, both domineering and gentle, really made it hard for her to resist. Willow was about to get out of bed when she realized something embarrassing. Her legs felt weak and her body was numb. Now, she was crouched on the ground with her face covered, and she did not want to get up at that moment. Jasper's kiss was too charming. As she pondered, a strange feeling of jealousy washed over her. She couldn't help but wonder if he had only kissed her before. The way he kissed her just now didn't feel like that of an inexperienced person. The thought of him possibly kissing other women made her heart tighten with unease. Just then, Willow reached for a piece of paper that was blown to the ground. She didn't even know she had picked up the wrong one. Originally, it was a painting, but suddenly she had a different perception of it. The sea depicted in the painting now looked like the sky, while the golden cloud-like elements in the sky became treasures beneath the sea. She stared at the painting for a long time. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration seemed to burst from her mind, leaving her dazed as she focused on the painting. Could we have been looking in the wrong direction? Is this painting hinting that the treasures back then weren't on land, but in the sea? Willow was pleasantly surprised at the thought of this. She picked up the painting and rushed to Winston's research room. When she pushed the door open, she caught Winston off guard. "Willow, did you find something?" Winston couldn't help but ask. "Yes, I think I might have found something." "Can you help me see if my direction is right?" she asked as she placed the paper on the table. It was a copy taken from a sheepskin scroll. She placed the painting on the table, but he naturally corrected it for her while saying, "Willow, you placed it upside down." At that, she immediately asserted, "No. We are supposed to view it upside down." Winston was puzzled, but he immediately stared at the paper. As he continued to look at it, he seemed to have discovered a new continent and looked at the drawing incredulously. "We were completely wrong in our previous direction. This painting should be viewed upside down. The blue above is not the sea but the sky, while the colorful red below is the sea, and the golden elements represent the treasures from back then. Yes. There's a high possibility that we've been looking in the wrong direction. I also just realized it. Could it be that those treasures from back then weren't hidden on land but sank to the seabed? That's highly possible. The records mentioned that they encountered typhoons and pirates back then. To protect the treasures, they might have considered this approach," Winston added excitedly as he looked at Willow with admiration. "Willow, you're so smart. Were you studying this all along?" "Well, Her face turned red under the lamplight. After all, the incident just now wasn't something she could easily talk about. "It was my negligence. I didn't even notice this. For now, we can't reveal anything to the outside, especially not to Jet. We need to search in the sea as soon as possible." "Yes. We need to do it quickly, and we must keep it a secret when we go underwater." Willow was excited about the possibility of searching underwater. Maybe they could get ahead. She walked out of Winston's office and saw a certain man who had just left. She could tell from his avoiding gaze that he felt embarrassed about the kiss, as it seemed to be an impulsive act driven by his loss of control. Though her face was also warm, she still wanted to share her discovery with him. She reached out and held his hand while saying, "Let's talk in my room." Jasper was once again pulled back into her room by Willow. As soon as the door closed, the atmosphere became somewhat ambiguous. She showed him the drawing and said, "Take a look. I just made a discovery. We suspect that the ancient artifacts were hidden underwater." He took the drawing and analyzed it. With his intelligence, he quickly noticed the same thing and nodded in agreement. "It's highly possible. I will dive tomorrow to search." "I'll go with you," she commented. "No." Jasper immediately refused. He thought that this dangerous task was not something Willow should undertake. "I'm good at diving. I can do it," Willow insisted. She wanted to go underwater with him. "I said it's not possible, and that's final," Jasper opposed firmly. She looked at him as she felt a bit aggrieved. "Why can't I do it? There are potential dangers at any moment underwater. In this area of the sea, you don't know if there are strong currents or sharks. In any case, you are not allowed to go underwater." His gaze firmly locked onto her as he announced, "You stay on the shore and wait for me." "What about you?" "It's dangerous. I'll have my father send professional divers over." Truth was, Willow was also worried about him. "You can send people over, but I will go down and check first." Jasper still wanted to protect her. "I have experience. Nothing will happen to me." Willow helplessly looked at him. "Okay, I'll have my father send someone over, and you can just check the area. Don't take too much risk. I'll worry about you too." After saying that, she put her hands around his sturdy waist and lifted her head to look at him. Jasper's breathing couldn't help but quicken again as he looked at her beautiful face. His willpower was put to an unprecedented test. "I have one more question to ask you. Your kissing skills are pretty good. Where did you learn them from?" Willow asked. This was important to her. He was speechless for a few seconds before answering, "I learned it myself." She burst into laughter. "Really?" "Yes. You know I never lie to you," Jasper stated. "And I will never lie to you in the future too." Willow's heart warmed, and she hugged him even tighter while saying impulsively, "Jasper, let's be in a relationship." Jasper was stunned upon hearing that. He hadn't expected her to be the one to take the initiative. For a moment, he looked at her and didn't know how to respond. He knew that if he agreed, he would have to promise a lifetime commitment. As such, he was afraid he couldn't live up to it in the future. If he were just an ordinary office worker, he could talk about relationships casually, but his identity didn't allow him to accept a relationship so easily. He couldn't even control his own fate, let alone drag a woman into his life. "Willow, let's focus on completing this mission first, okay?" Jasper tried to soothe her. Willow also knew that she couldn't push him too hard. After all, his identity was special, but that was okay. She had time and could wait. She smiled sweetly and murmured, "Okay. Take your time to think about it. Just let me know when you've made a decision." How could Jasper reject such a lively and innocent woman? In fact, he was already standing on the edge of a cliff, ready to fall into her sweet smile at any moment. "Okay. I'll prepare the diving equipment, and I'll go down to check at dawn," Jasper commented. Willow tightly held his wrist as she added, "Be careful. As important as the ancient artifacts are, your life is more important." At that, Jasper reassured her. "I'll be careful. I promise." At this moment, in a camp more than a mile away, Jet sat beside his technical staff and urged, "Hurry up. We must obtain information from the other side. I need to know their next move. Boss, they have a skilled computer expert who set up a network firewall that we can't breach." The person operating the computer was sweating profusely. "Aren't you a top-notch hacker? Yet you can't even break into their network?" Jet was angry. "Their skills are obviously better than mine. I did my best, and I feel they are using an independent satellite network, making it impossible to hack into. You're useless. Jet growled and he went to his office. He had assembled a team of professional archaeologists, and they were all analyzing the data they had. What's the result? Have you found out where those treasures are hidden? He asked impatiently. We haven't found anything yet. He picked up his phone and called his team's surveillance personnel who were monitoring Willow's group. What's going on? Are they making any moves? We haven't seen any action yet. Their people are all in the activity area and haven't left. After Jet hung up the phone, his eyes flickered with strong ambition. He must obtain these treasures. He had invested so much this time and he couldn't afford to lose. Moreover, he had promised the country that they could buy back the treasures at a high price, which would make him extremely wealthy. He was determined to obtain this batch of treasures at all costs. In his eyes, Willow was just a little girl. How could she compete with him? Other than her family background, he didn't care about her at all. In the ship's room, Willow slept restlessly. When she woke up, she saw that the bed next to her was empty. Jasper? She hurriedly sat up, pushed the door, and ran out to the corridor. Johanna hurriedly came over. Miss Presgrave, what's wrong? Did you have a nightmare? Where is he? Willow's eyes were filled with anxiety and worry. Mr. Wyatt has already gone underwater. Ricky and 2 colleagues are with him. Don't worry. Willow's heart was still tense when she heard this. Now, she worried about Jasper whenever he went on a mission. I'll make breakfast for you. You can go back to your room and rest, Johanna suggested. Willow nodded and returned to her room. She went out to the balcony and looked at the vast sea, her heart heavy with worry. The whole morning, Willow couldn't eat or drink. She just stared at the sea. As they were not expecting to go diving, they didn't have enough equipment and communication devices. Willow had contacted her family last night to send the equipment over, but it would take about a week to arrive. Jasper was worried that Jet might also discover this information, so he took the risk and went diving. Finally, at around 12 p.m., 4 people came swimming back to the surface. Willow heard the news and rushed over to see the 4 of them safe and sound, and she finally let go of the anxiety in her heart. At the same time, she felt embarrassed and avoided looking at the man taking off his diving suit and showing his upper body. You guys better go take a shower, Willow said as her gaze lingered on Jasper's face. Meanwhile, Jasper couldn't care about showering and said, Come with me to see Winston. We made a discovery down there. In Winston's office were photos they took in the afternoon, showing several ghost ships. Those fleets sank into the sea, and they only had time to evacuate the crew. All the artifacts remained in the sunken ship's cargo hold. Now, the wooden planks have disappeared, and all the artifacts are at the bottom of the sea. Willow's eyes widened as she exclaimed in excitement, This is fantastic. We finally found it, Winston. We've finally made a breakthrough. Winston, who was equally thrilled, gave a firm nod in return. Yes. We didn't just achieve something spectacular, as it's also a great achievement for our country. My parents' salvage team is on their way, but it will take them about 5 days to arrive. We'll have to keep this a secret from Jet for now. They have definitely come prepared with all the necessary equipment in order to start salvaging immediately. Since this is international waters, we can't restrict their actions. We will need to act as quickly as possible, Winston reminded, growing tense. Jasper nodded in agreement. After he returned to his room, he took a shower and started working on his computer. Johanna then brought him a cup of coffee, and Willow handed the cup to him. Have some coffee to stay alert, Willow said to him. Jasper obediently took a few sips of coffee. Just as he was about to put the cup down, Willow held onto the cup and started drinking from the same cup. Jasper's heart skipped a beat as he worked on his computer and swiftly noticed several hacker accounts attempting to breach his defenses. A faint smirk appeared on his lips. It was a smile of contempt. Willow placed the cup of coffee down as she looked at his broad back and reached out tentatively. Even though she couldn't understand the complex programs on his computer, she still wanted to be near him as she wrapped her arms around his neck and pressed her chin against his shoulder. He turned his face to the side in response. She couldn't help but giggle as their cheeks pressed against the others before she planted 2 quick kisses on his cheek. His composure wavered slightly, and a faint smile crept onto his lips as he was unable to resist the sweet gesture. It was clear that she was also basking in the moment as she simply nestled into his shoulder. In the afternoon, the two of them enjoyed the subtle atmosphere in the room, which was even more exhilarating than being in a real romantic relationship. "What are you doing?" Willow asked. "Building a firewall," Jasper replied absent-mindedly while his fingers typed away complex code that seemed to flow effortlessly under his hands. She shot him a look of admiration. "You're amazing." Although he had heard similar praises in the past, it was different when it fell from her lips. At this moment, the atmosphere in Jet's team was tense and restless. His subordinates were all brainstorming for ideas when one of them blurted, "Why don't we check underwater? Perhaps the ship sank here all those years ago." "You're right. We haven't found anything on the island yet, but there might be clues underwater." Jet started contemplating the plausibility of this option. Even though it might be a waste of resources, it was still worth a try. His subordinates, feeling the pressure and fearing criticism, decided to take the plunge into the sea to see if they could find any clues. Willow arranged for her family's bodyguards to spy on their movements. When evening fell, they reported some crucial information. Willow, Winston, and Jasper discussed the situation in the meeting room. Willow was understandably anxious since the shipwreck was nearby. There was a high chance the others might very well stumble upon it if they went underwater. "We can't let them find it before we do, otherwise, they'll take everything for themselves," she muttered anxiously. She was growing increasingly agitated because this operation meant a lot to her. Jasper put his hand on her shoulder reassuringly. "Don't worry. I won't let them get their hands on it until we do." Winston sighed wearily. "Mr. Wyatt, based on my observations last time, Jet Jefferson has brought over a dozen muscles with him. We do have our men, but things might get out of control the instant we're in conflict. The artifacts are important, but so are our lives, especially Sweetie here." She was the baby of the Presgrave family. Since they couldn't decide on what to do for now, Willow stepped outside to catch some fresh air. She had asked around and discovered that her family's salvage team would take at least 3 days to make it here. Jasper leaned against the railing and tenderly gazed at her stressed figure. At that moment, he desperately wanted to ease her emotions. He couldn't help but feel his heart ache at her anxious expression whenever he laid his eyes on her. Willow forced herself to ease up a bit as she smiled at Jasper. "Don't worry about me. I'm just a bit nervous. I'll be fine." Jasper reached out to tidy her bangs, which had been blown into an utter mess by the sea breeze. "Don't worry. I won't let anyone take away what is yours." Unfortunately, she was unaware that her nervousness only exacerbated the anxiety dwelling within the man's heart. He just didn't show it. She leaned into his embrace and hugged his sturdy body. "I know. I feel much more at ease with you here." Yet, Jasper wanted her to be absolutely worry-free. The little wrinkle between her brows only tugged at his heartstrings. That night, the bodyguards sent back a message that Jet's team was preparing to go underwater early the next morning. The intense emotions overwhelmed Willow, causing her to have trouble sleeping that night. Now that they had found the treasure, she had to watch helplessly as someone else took it away before they could lay their claim on it. It was truly distressing for her. This was international waters where Jet had the authority to do anything without facing any consequences. Later, Willow heard some speedboats had set off. So, she dashed to Winston's office but couldn't find Jasper anywhere. "Where is he?" "Mr. Wyatt just went out to sea. He said he had something to take care of." "What is he doing out there?" "I'm afraid I don't know, as he didn't say why. He always acts so mysteriously, and it's not like I can ask him just like that," Winston explained. Johanna comforted her. "Miss, don't worry. Mr. Wyatt is probably just doing what needs to be done. I just hope he doesn't encounter any danger." Willow's worries intensified as time passed. Where had Jasper gone? He had gone to the pirate ship, which had become something like a ghost ship. There was an advanced fishing net here, and he used his computer to operate the ship's fishing equipment. An hour later, the automatic fishing equipment brought nearly 1,000 pounds of fish. He had it rather simple planned for these fish. He wanted to attract the rulers of the sea sharks. He had researched the area and found that past researchers had detected the presence of numerous sharks in this area of international waters. Fortunately, the sharks mostly dwelled in the deep sea and rarely approached the coastal waters. However, if there was a significant amount of fish blood in the area, it could attract them to swarm the area. Sharks were not particularly interested in human blood, but they had a strong attraction to fish blood. As long as there was blood around the area, the sharks would be attracted to swim out of their dwellings. It also definitely helped that they had an extremely sensitive sense of smell when it came to their prey. That was precisely what Jasper was trying to do, attract the sharks. He knew that the only way to stop Jet's actions was to make them fear going underwater and prevent them from diving. All he needed to do was buy a few more days for their own salvage team to arrive. Nearly 100 fish were chopped up and thrown into the sea, spreading the smell of blood around the boat. Once Jasper was done, he stood on the deck, observing the surroundings using a telescope. This task required absolute patience, and it just so happened it was something he excelled at. Sleep continued to elude Willow as she remained on the boat, unable to contact him. She had no idea what he was planning. Around 4:00 a.m., the full moon in the sky glowed brighter. Suddenly, the boat he was on shook slightly when something bumped into it. From below, Jasper instinctively picked up a flare and threw it into the water. Several dorsal fins emerged on the surface of the water, indicating that his summoning had succeeded. The sharks swam around the area without venturing too far as they started competing for the fish floating around. As dawn approached, his speedboat returned to the coastline. It was loaded with 10 packages of minced fish meat. Then, he used a telescope to watch Jet's team that was preparing to dive into the sea. Jasper wasted no time in tossing the fish meat into the sea, specifically placing it around the area where the shipwreck was located. At this moment, Jet's team was just about to head out to sea. They had already discussed amongst themselves and eventually decided to dive about 1 kilometer away from their boat. Just as they were going through the diving plan on their boat, a female team member suddenly pointed at the sea in terror. "What is that? Oh, my goodness! Is that a shark?" Other team members immediately gathered around as some of them picked up binoculars and looked at the dorsal fins on the water before they exclaimed in panic, "What's going on? Why are there sharks here? What should we do? We can't dive if there's a risk of shark attacks. It would be disastrous." Although they were hired for the job, their lives were always their top priority. "Hurry! Contact Jet and report the situation here." After Jet received the call and a few photos soon after, he immediately cursed in frustration. "Boss, we can't dive today. We can't take the risk now that there are sharks lurking in the area." Jet had no choice but to give up upon hearing those words. So, he ordered them to return and wait until the sharks were gone before deciding on a new diving date. Willow also soon received a report from the bodyguards that Jet's crew had returned. Why did they turn around? Willow asked in surprise. We are not sure what is going on, but none of them have gone underwater. Even their equipment was unloaded from the ship. Regardless of the reason, Willow couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Just then, she heard someone outside greeting Jasper. So, she rushed out in excitement and threw herself into his arms. Good news! Jet's men didn't dive. Jasper gently pushed her away from his embrace. I know. She blinked, a bit puzzled that he had been absent all night. To make matters even stranger, he was even rejecting her physical affections. Why won't you let me hug you? Willow murmured, feeling wronged. It's not that. I smell of blood, I need to take a shower first. She hurriedly inquired, where were you last night? I attracted some sharks nearby. That's why Jet's men turned back. He didn't see the point in hiding anything from her. Oh ho! Willow was astonished. Even Winston was shocked. It turned out there truly was nothing Jasper couldn't do in this world. He actually managed to do something like this. Nonetheless, Willow still rushed into his arms and hugged his waist. I don't mind if you're dirty. You're not allowed to push me away. Jasper smiled helplessly. All right, all right. Winston, who accidentally witnessed their intimate moment, quickly fled the scene. Jasper returned to where Willow was after taking a nice refreshing shower. On the other hand, Willow had prepared breakfast for him. Then, they spent a romantic time together as they sat in the cabin's lounge, enjoying the sea view. She propped her chin and looked at him with her big eyes that possessed the mysterious ability to say everything she was thinking, making him a bit embarrassed. Don't stare at me, he complained affectionately in a gentle tone. She blinked. But I like looking at you. Is that a crime, Mr. Wyatt? This statement carried a hint of flirtation, paired with Willow's smug smile. Well, it left the man somewhat speechless. It's your fault for having a face so handsome. In fact, it should be a crime to look this good. Don't blame me for looking at you. Willow teasingly pushed the responsibility back to him. The man couldn't help but choke slightly at her brazen words, his handsome face and ears turning pink. It seemed that he was still weak to teasing. All right, enjoy your breakfast. I'll go back to my room to rest for a bit. I didn't sleep well last night when you were away. Willow didn't disturb him any longer. Okay. Jasper nodded. She felt relieved after learning about what happened with Jet's team. They had decided not to dive and were now changing their focus to search for clues in the mountains. Since Jet and his team didn't dare to take their chances underwater, she could delay their actions until her salvage team arrived. Moreover, in order to preserve the artifacts, a team of national archaeologists, along with 20 bodyguards from the Presgrave family, were sent. They were all working together to safeguard her cause. 3 days had passed in the blink of an eye. As Jet stood on his ship with a pair of binoculars in his hands to watch Willow's team, he was suddenly filled with worry. Why aren't her people doing anything? Did she already discover something? Lately, he had also been filled with anxiety as this expedition had cost him a considerable amount of money. He feared he would go bankrupt if they returned empty-handed. His fortune relied on the valuable artifacts, which were supposed to be a surefire source of wealth. Jet had never once thought he was a good person. He had to figure out Willow's secret. To do that, he needed to kidnap the person closest to her. Soon, a pile of photos was placed on Jet's desk. The photos showed a young and handsome man who stayed with Willow day and night. He was someone closest to her. Who is he? We haven't figured out his identity yet, but he's the person closest to Willow Presgrave. They have meals and live together. If Willow has any secrets, he'd be the one who knows them best, reported one of Jet's subordinates. He nodded in satisfaction and pointed to the photo. Then, he will do. Find a chance to bring him to me. I want to ask him some questions. Jet couldn't help but admit that the man in the pictures was charming. I wouldn't be surprised if he turns out to be Willow's boyfriend. Thus, Jet's phone found the chance to start monitoring Jasper. Meanwhile, Jasper was bringing some things to the shore on behalf of Willow. The team members here were now more relaxed as they hadn't received any specific orders. They were simply working for their wages. After he placed the things down, he noticed someone behind the rocks using binoculars to spy on him. Thus, he feigned ignorance as he deliberately walked to a nearby path, away from the team. At the same time, Jet's men immediately gathered their team and took the opportunity to kidnap Jasper. Jasper walked about a kilometer away, fully aware that someone was following him. "Hey, you there? Our boss wants to see you. Come with us," a man threatened in English. "What if I refuse to cooperate?" Jasper turned around and asked. "Then, don't blame us for not holding back." The man took out a gun and pointed it at Jasper. "You'd better listen to us obediently. I can't be sure where I might aim my gun next." Jasper immediately surrendered by raising his hands and following the group, who then took him into Jet's territory. Jet was overjoyed that they had easily captured the person closest to Willow. Therefore, he quickly came over just to interrogate Jasper personally. Jasper was already tied to a chair at this moment. Soon, the interrogation began with only two of Jet's subordinates present. "What is your name?" "Ads by Pub Future." "You're not worthy of asking me that," Jasper replied coldly. "You should know that cooperating with me now is in your best interest. I'm not a patient man, so answer my question." He added, "What is your relationship with Willow?" Still, Jasper only quirked his eyebrow and retorted, "You have no right to know. I'm telling you, no one will ever find you if I kill you here and toss your body on another island," Jet threatened. Unbeknownst to him, the person that he was threatening was someone who excelled in assassination. "Fine, let's switch gears. Did you guys make any recent discoveries? Have you found that batch of relics? Just tell me. I can make it worth your while." Jet decided to entice Jasper. Jasper stated icily, "I suggest you leave this place and not get in Willow's way. See here. You are in my hands now. It's not your turn to threaten me. I'm the one interrogating you." Jet was so angry he almost went crazy. Jasper was a surprisingly tough opponent. Alas, there was only a wave of calmness in Jasper's eyes instead of fear. "I truly admire your courage. But, if you don't cooperate with me, I'll have no choice but to kidnap Miss Presgrave and force something out of her mouth." Jasper's aura seemed to explode out of his body right then and there. "Try laying a finger on her and see what happens," he snarled. Jet couldn't help but step back in fear. When he realized what happened, he quickly coughed to cover his embarrassment. What was he afraid of? This man in front of him was literally bound by a rope and had his hands tied behind his back. "If you cooperate and tell me what I want to know, I won't touch Willow Presgrave." "It all depends on whether you would work with us," Jet mentioned as he started another round of questions. "Have you found those cultural relics? Why are your team members playing around all relaxed and carefree if you haven't? I'll say it again, take your men and get out of here, or else. Frankly, you should be worried about your life." Jet unconsciously frowned as his patience ran thin. "I see you prefer to do this the hard way. Boy, give him a good beating, I'm sure he'll confess after that." As Jet's henchmen raised their fists to strike Jasper's face, the man who had been bound to the chair reached out, blocked the blows, and quickly grabbed the chair. Jet's henchmen were knocked down one after another with a fierce swing. Jasper exuded a dangerous aura, and it was one filled with killing intent. Jet's eyes widened in disbelief as he desperately tried to flee. Unfortunately, Jasper kicked him from behind, sending him crashing into the wall before Jasper pressed him firmly against the wall. "Spare me. Please, spare me." Jet begged in fear as he never imagined that the man constantly by Willow would be so skilled. "I promise you. I will chase you to the ends of the earth if you dare lay a finger on Willow." Jasper's warning that pierced Jet's ears sounded like they were the words spoken by the god of death himself. Regardless, Jasper still knocked Jet unconscious with a single punch. He had initially wanted to see why Jet had kidnapped him, but now it seemed like Jet was just trying to threaten him. When Jet finally woke up from his impromptu nap, he kicked the door in frustration when he found that Jasper was already long gone. In the evening, a massive ship appeared on the horizon in the sunset. Willow picked up her binoculars and exclaimed joyfully, "Our people have arrived." As she turned her head, she noticed that the man next to her had returned. "So," she asked curiously, "why did you take so long?" "Nothing happened, right?" "Right." Jasper shook his head. She didn't dwell on it as she happily gazed into the distance with her binoculars. Her spirits soared at the thought that her mission would soon be completed. He couldn't help but feel happy as his gaze landed on her joyous face. On the other hand, not only did Jet not get anything out of the interrogation, but he soon received a message from his subordinates that another large ship had arrived at Willow's location. This made him extremely anxious. It seemed like Willow had found the cultural relics. Then again, where exactly are the relics? On the mountains? Or did they hide the relics? After an hour of sailing, the massive ship finally arrived at its destination, precisely where the cultural relics were located. This made the salvage work far more convenient. As Willow boarded the ship, she was greeted by a neat row of bodyguards, who respectfully called out, "Miss." "Thank you all for your hard work," Willow replied with a smile, exuding the air of a wealthy young lady. Winston also gathered his subordinates on board and briefed them on their discovery. All the crew members were delighted. Then, Winston also explained the reasons behind their secrecy. After the incident with Morgan, they knew that the less they knew, the safer they would be. Next, they discussed the salvage plan. The sharks that Jasper had previously attracted to the area had already left. This was because the location was not a place where sharks typically lingered for long periods of time. They were not likely to return now that there was no food to lure them here. Since the cultural relics had been underwater for quite some time, any disturbance required extreme caution. Thus, the work had to be carried out by professional divers, and Willow, who had experience in relic collection, decided to join the diving team. This worried a certain man. So, once the meeting adjourned, he took her back to their room and sternly insisted, "You are not allowed to go underwater." "Why not? We have a large team and complete equipment. Why can't I go?" Willow wanted to see the relics for herself. Plus, she wasn't as delicate as he seemed to think. She even had a diving certificate to prove it. Hence, she was perfectly capable of pulling this off. "There's no reason. You simply can't," Jasper growled. He was being overbearing, hoping she would stay on the ship. There were too many unpredictable factors underwater. He couldn't help but worry about any potential risks.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.